I got thumbs up, which means I should be live. Hello, everyone. Once you can hear me, we will get the story. Yeah, everyone's already reacting. So once I get confirmation that you can hear, we will get this show started. All clear. You're here. Everyone's saying they can hear me. Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dev Stream number 7, our very, very special Dev Stream number 7. Today I have with me, as everyone is saying in chat, the man, the myth, and the legend, Ian Currie. Hey, Ian, how you doing today?
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're gonna have fun today. We have a lot to talk about. I know people were asking a whole bunch of questions already on the different forum threads and everything. So I think everyone's very eager to pick your brain and hear about the history of Jagged Alliance.
All right. Well, let's have fun.
Everyone, I hope you're excited. We have a lot of questions to go through. Ian's a little bit quiet. I think Simon's our background producer is working on turning him up. He actually, we were talking about this in prep. He spent a bit of time trying to get his more broadcast mic hooked up, and you were having technical challenges or something with that, right?
Yep. So I'm just basically using just a little old web camera right now. So I apologize if the quality is not as great, but it was a technological fail for me.
Hey, you know what? We have a classic conversation with a classical mic. It's going to be great. So, I mean, this is probably the first time you've really talked to fans about Jagged Alliance, I imagine, in quite a while.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like decade.
I know people were just chomping at the bit to get in here and ask a lot about the old titles. But I mean, it's I imagine we were talking about this a little bit before during the pre-stream prep. Like sometimes, especially in game development, when you work on so many different titles, stuff does get a little bit fuzzy after a while. So it's going to be a little bit of like a remembrance trip, right? Like trying to remember down memory lane all of those questions and topics from the old days.
Yeah, and we're gonna see just how bad my memory actually is. Oh, it'll be a good test.
Oh, I don't think it's that bad. I remember in a lot of our conversations, I was always impressed by just how much you could recall from the decision making and some of the creative discussions you guys had during Jagged Alliance development. So I think the fans would have a lot of fun today. So
I do have lots of great memories of that time. So
So we have a whole bunch of questions that I've written down here. This is gonna be a little bit of a different stream. So usually, as everyone knows, we go through the Dev Diary topics. There is a really, really cool Dev Diary live right now talking about the arts and the world building for Jagged Alliance 3. Nelson put that Dev Diary together. If you haven't read it, it's on community.jaggedalliance.com. We had talked about maybe having Ian, Nelson and one of the level designers join us for today, but we decided just to focus on Ian and go through some questions with him. But I really recommend you guys take a look at it if you haven't. I mean, Ian, what do you think about the visuals and the world building the Hemlock team has done so far?
I think they've done an amazing job. For me, it's what's really cool about it is back when I was working on Jagged Alliance 2. I mean, if you look at how I guess archaic the graphics are in that game by comparison, where it was a tile-based game. It wasn't truly 3D. We might have rendered 3D characters and objects and stuff, but it was all built together with 2D objects. And the lighting, I mean, you just saw squares where, like, if it was at nighttime and it was a light, there was some tiles that were brighter than the other ones. And it was very hokey looking, right? You got past that, you got into the game, but when I see that the magic that the team has created with the graphics, it's so immersive. I admit to being a bit of an eye candy guy. I'm a videophile, I'm an audiophile. I love how immersive it is because it just pulls me in. Maybe after a while you take it for granted, but I mean the graphics are just stellar in my opinion. I just love it.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that I've always been super excited about with just how much the team has brought the visual look forward is just all of the dynamics to the time of day and the weather, because you get a lot of different moods and atmospheres depending on what time of day you go into a map, and that's, I think, in the Dev Diary they have like some of those side by side images of some of the different areas that show that visual diversity. I really enjoy that.
Yeah. That again, stellar job. I just can't imagine it being better.
I see a lot of people though. There's a, and I'm actually this way too. You know, being someone that started playing my very first game console. I'm going to age myself a little bit though. My very first game console I ever played was a Pong 2. It's the original Pong, like paddle consoles, way back in the day. That's the very first thing I ever played on. But I am a little bit of a an old. I like the old pixel art. I think the old pixel art really does stand up.
Okay. I mean, back then we didn't have a choice, but now we do. Um, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some fondness for that old style and stuff. And some of my favorite games that go back and look at them now, and I go, wow, like I used to think this was just so amazing. And I mean, it's great for with the time what they were able to accomplish. But I admit it's nice to have the graphic abilities that we have today.
I think one of the things that I'm always impressed with is just how much emotion and atmosphere that, artists were able to pull off and bring together back then with so little to work with when it comes to how much pixels you could work with through a space and the amount of memory limitations you had for characters and it's a I imagine that's a because you're also a programmer, you're a programmer by trade, so there's a lot of we can only do this much. Like this is all we got. So we got to be really creative with those pixels, the texture sheets and whatnot.
It's like packing a car for a trip, right? You treat it as a fun little game. How can I fit the most in here and be efficient with it? So that's a game in itself. Making a game is like playing a game.
I've never heard that analogy before. I like it. So we have a number of questions I'm watching for in chat. I have a couple that I'm going to bring up from the community posts, and I think I'm going to just start getting into it because I think there's some really interesting topics for us to talk about. So let me see here. The first one I want to ask. Let's see. I'm going to grab a good one to start with. Well, this is kind of a controversial question, so we'll see how you answer this one. So, Grim from the community site asked, "How did Mr. Curry?" By the way, I love how they were calling you Mr. Curry. They were very respectful.
It means I'm old.
Yeah, I don't know if that's. I think that's more of a term of respect than of age. So, how did Mr. Curry experience the period between Jagged Alliance 2 and Jagged Alliance 3? Did Jagged Alliance remain in his heart? Did he want to make another one or go experience other things? Did he keep an eye on the games made by other companies with Alliance and with the license, and what did he feel about it? So it's really a question about what your opinion was during that time from when you kind of let go of the reins and both kind of not touching it for a long time as well as just what you felt about some of the things that were happening to it. Again, I'm not sure how much you want to share, but you can share whatever you like.
Okay. Um, well, that you're talking about a long period of time, first of all, right? And um, I lost the reins. I didn't give them up, and just these things happen. And when I saw that other games were coming out, um, I got to look at them, really briefly, and it wasn't a pleasant thing for me. It wasn't so much like, oh, gee, I wasn't involved in this, but I didn't respect what was done, just to be blunt. So I didn't play them. I checked them out, and it would only take me a few minutes to go, like, yeah, just this part. So, because you create something, and I mean, I've such an attachment to it. It was my life for 10 years actually, and or maybe even a little bit more because you think of the incubation period for making the first game and all that sort of stuff. So, and Jagged Alliance 2 was at the time pretty much what I wanted to deliver, because no one was stopping me. I had no producer above me, pulling in the reins. I got to do whatever I wanted. The time working with the team was some of my best memories, etc. So all this was creates a really big attachment. I was really proud of the game. And then when I saw other games come out, I said, that's just not a Jagged Alliance game. I mean, to be fair, after Jagged Alliance 2, there was Jagged Alliance 2 Unfinished Business, and that was hardly a full Jagged Alliance game. That was done on the cheap just to kind of do something. And sure enough, you can just tell that's not what people wanted. They wanted the total sandbox, free flowing do whatever you want at your own pace type of game. And none of the other games that came out between Jagged Alliance 2 and Jagged Alliance 3 even set out to try to do that. This is the first attempt that is doing that and doing it very well, I might add. So yeah, none of the other games, and I didn't even play the mods that much. So I respected them, mainly because at that point I had to mentally move on. I was working on other games at this point for other studios, and I had deadlines, etc. So yeah, I didn't play the mods much, but I respected them.
Yeah, I feel whenever you have those kind of circumstances, it's almost like trying to get over a relationship, right? You can't just keep stringing it along. You have to find a way to add a little bit of separation. And especially when you're watching something that you've created go through so many permutations and adjustments, it's tough, right? You want to go back and steer the ship, but you don't obviously have the ability or the opportunity to do that. I remember, our very first conversation many years ago. This is something that we talked about quite a bit, which is what makes up a Jagged Alliance game and what was the dynamics. And I was really grateful for all of your feedback that back then when you were playing some of the early builds, and we were discussing with Hemimont, what was most important when it comes to I'm gonna use the word character, but the feature set, the focus points. And you mentioned one of them right there, which I think was a big conversation for us, which is how do we create that sense of freedom and choice and allowing players to make their own way that some of those in between games didn't really embody. And I mean, we'll see how the fans react to whether we did a good job with that or not, but it was definitely something we talked about a lot on the developer side. And I know we talked a lot about with you as we were even working on some of the story and the narrative bits.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a huge gap, I think, between what was done between Jagged Alliance 2 and Jagged Alliance 3 and what the team has just pulled off with this game.
Yeah.
There's no comparison. It's night and day.
I love Dakan. By the way, about Dakan, I've definitely seen your Steam Deck post. I think you're on like number 9 right now. So I know at least one person in chat really, really wants to play Jag on Steam Deck. I'm not going to confirm or deny if it'll work on Steam Deck or not, but I definitely see it. Thank you. So let's go into, and this is another. Let's see. I'm gonna grab another question here because I think. This is some of these questions are so funny. There's another one I think is going to be a little bit of a hard hitter and maybe one that you won't be able to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways because why not? So Wigan asks, it is known that at the time of Surtech's bankruptcy, the team was working on Jagged Alliance 3. I'm guessing it was known. I know it's been a few years, but could you? No, I'm going to skip that one actually. The second one was what I wanted. Imagine that you are woken up by the phone tomorrow morning. A familiar voice answers the phone. Hi, this is Norma Olson. We're reactivating Surtech. Will you join me? What do you answer?
Yeah, Norm Olson was one of the great artists working on the game on Jagged Alliance 2, and I got to work with him on another project at another company right afterwards. So basically, I feel like I have a great relationship with him, and I love the guy. Yeah, it'd be fun to get the old band back together, that's for sure.
Yeah, Wigan, that was your question. I was going through your questions. I bounced off the first one because that's a tough question to answer, but I went for the second one, so we got one of them. Another one we had here that I thought was interesting, and this is something that and I really like this because it's a question that we talked about a lot on the writing team, and we talked a ton about in the very beginning. So I think it's one that is, I wouldn't say a struggle, but it's a tough balancing act. So I'll just get the question out. So Cordnor asked, Jagged Alliance 1 had much more quirky characters like Ruben and Skits, Lance and Wink, and many others, which were cut from Jagged Alliance 2. Was that a deliberate choice to make Jagged Alliance 2 more, quote, serious, unquote? And then, of course, any chance to see some of them again in the future. And then someone said, not necessarily Ruben, but Turtle Guts to have some fans. So this is a really tough question because I know we talked about this. I mean, I think we had an entire meeting just on this topic alone. This is a very complex line to go between.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's funny, Ruben and Turtle. I haven't thought about those characters in a long time. Um, I think Jagged Alliance 1 was this weird matchup of some true silliness and it tried to also be a very serious game. So most of our merc characters were basically fish out of water. I mean, we had a ex-baseball player. We had that's just silly. It really is. So to answer the question, yes, when we set out to make Jagged Alliance 2, we definitely tried to make it a lot more serious. We still wanted humor in it. That's when I think we kind of went for the 80s style of action movies with the one-line clips and stuff like this, because uh, you're playing a game to be entertained. So and there's different levels of entertainment, and so we still kept some funniness. We still got some silliness. If I think of interactions between Elliot and Dedrana, they were they were just funny. So we would laugh a lot, and especially John and I, we'd be on the phone every day, and I think sometimes we might have been guilty of self-indulgence, of just going down that rabbit hole of just as funny to us, so we wanted to do it, and and but it kind of worked because we didn't go too far, I think, in this silly direction. We kept it humorous, but at the it was still a very sandbox style game and serious, and you could kind of play it without really experiencing too much of that silliness.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about this because I think the just as you were getting involved and kind of helping us and some of those early conversations, Hemimont was really trying to figure out where that line was, and they had their own questions. We went through, and I think the very first content we built around Ernie Island, all of us looked at it and went, man, we kind of went a little too dark and too serious to start. And Jagged Alliance did have some levity, and I think you even had that feedback in the very beginning. What's in there is really cool, and there's some neat moral decisions that you get to make, and some really important ones. But the inner and I remember the comment that you made, which is the because I asked you. How, and it's funny, it's a very similar question than this, and I asked you this in the very beginning. How did you make the judgment on whether something was, too far on one side or the other? And I remember your response was, we wanted to and you said the same line right there to a certain degree. We wanted to entertain first. Our goal was to be entertaining. And we felt like if we entertained, whether it was with drama or with humor, we were hitting that mark. That's what we were trying to do. And we looked at some of the movie references and how they would kind of toe that line, and that's what we were trying to draw from. And I feel like we've done that with Jagged Alliance 3 as well, and trying to find that sweet spot. There's some moments where even I was playing early test builds and laughing out loud, and there's some moments where it's like, oh man, like we're that's an intense decision and situation to be in, and you have to make some choices. Um, I think it's a good balancing act that you have to toe between there. And I find it interesting because I noticed when I was reading some of the trailer feedback, some people don't realize just how much Jagged Alliance embraces some of that form of, now we've updated. Right before it was 80s and Jag 2, now we're trying to do the 90s blockbusters, but we're still trying to do a lot of those homages to those characters and those personalities. It does have that, and I think it's part of the DNA of the franchise to bring that forward.
It is, and I remember you and I having conversations about this and what the right amount of humor was, because originally the game did feel very serious right from the start. And of course, you could kind of say that even the graphic style is pretty serious.
Yeah.
So it basically means you got to really think about how you integrate, the humor and keeping some of the quirkiness of Jagged Alliance in there. But it's also, I think, in the long run, it's a serious game. So
Yeah.
it's not a game where you're going to be constantly entertained with that you're sitting back and being passive. No, you are constantly doing things and making decisions and exploring, experimenting, prodding the beast here and there. But hopefully we've peppered it a little bit with just enough of that flavor that makes it still feel, makes you laugh out loud when you weren't expecting something.
Yeah. Marcus, we talked about that a little bit. Yeah, I know it's Ian's had tried to get a different mic working, and we're on a webcam mic, so it's something we're gonna have to just it's still good. I hopefully you can still hear it. We tuned up the volume a little bit. So another question that to change direction for a little bit to do a little bit more of a game mechanics question. Um, Cordner also asked one that I thought was really good, and I wanted to grab this one as well. He or she asked, you also mentioned that during development, Jagged Alliance was a real time with pause game at first, but you hated hitting pause all the time. How did you perceive it when the industry decided that real time with pause is mandatory, and even one of the Jagged Alliance decided to go 3D because it's 3D? So kind of that evolution of real time with pause as a mechanic more widely out in the industry. Was that something that you noticed and reacted to, and thinking about how you viewed it back then?
Yeah, so it's correct. Jagged Alliance one uh, was real time at first. Um, uh, I made the decision to change it at some point because if you're when you're real time, you're relying a lot more on AI to operate your characters. Otherwise, you'd be pausing every second to constantly make decisions. And really wanted you to feel more in control than it felt like at the time. And so when you have AI making decisions on behalf of the player, if something bad happens, the player just blames the AI, it's crappy AI, and not themselves. And I wanted players to blame themselves when something didn't go the way they wanted, so that they would feel they had the agency to go back and try it again and approach it differently, etc. So it became the turn based. And ironically, for Jagged Alliance 2, when we started off, we once again went back to like, how do we make this real time model work?
Oh, really?
The first demos, I think I at a trade show, I don't know if it was CS or whatever, but we had a real time version of it. And but because I kind of think we did that again. There was probably some pressure that turn-based games were going to be a little bit more niche, and there was so many. That was at the time of these um, uh, real-time strategy games, right, like Command and Conquer and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So we tried it, but ultimately said it's just not right for that. We'll settle with you know um, maybe alienating some players who just don't have the patience for a turn-based game. But we really wanted, and we knew that the heart of it was that you making very finite and minute decisions about combat, for example. So
Yeah, I find that I don't get me wrong. I play a lot of real time games, and even games like though like games like Stellaris, which I've played quite a bit of. It's a real time 4X game, and it's massively scaled, and I do find myself finding having that same kind of play style where you pause, make decisions, unpause, walk it, go, pause again. You're kind of following that flow because there's so much that you have to think through, and I find that especially with the level of decision making that Jagged Alliance really embodies when it comes to weaponry and environment and situational dynamics and the condition of the mercs. If you were trying to do that in real time, we'd have to simplify some of those decisions in order to really make them viable. So that depth is something that I think fits the turn-based genre quite well.
mm,
I would be interesting to know what Jagged Alliance 2 looked like real time. That'd be uh that'd be an exercise. I imagine it was a lot.
yeah, I wanted to know a video on YouTube. This was pre-YouTube days, but it might have been captured on videotape or something from the show or something. I don't know. That would be interesting to go back and revisit that.
Right. Now everything's on YouTube, so all the stuff we do now, mistakes are all they live in real time forever, right? It was more like turn-based pause when it comes to storing stuff back then, but now it's all right there. So another question I thought was really interesting, that is kind of related but not in the same tier because I didn't know about the real-time version in Jagged Alliance 2. Castle asked, what mechanics or systems did you cut out from Jagged Alliance 2, if any? And what did you make about some of the features that people had modded into the game, games like Jagged Alliance 2? And he mentioned like the food mechanics or any other features that were increasing gameplay depth. And obviously, the real time one was an example of something that you put in Jagged Alliance 2 and ended up pulling out. But was there other things in Jag 2 that you had originally wanted to do that just technically didn't work or didn't fit what you were building that maybe you can pull back from the memory bin?
Um, yes, to answer your question, yes, there were certainly some things. Like, for example, um, I know that I would have liked more of a in-depth quest system, something that is now present in Jagged Alliance 3.
Mm.
Um, but we were already making a pretty big step between Jagged Alliance 1 and Jagged Alliance 2 to introduce any sort of ability to go and talk to NPCs, for example. Um, so there was that. I should say, I remember thinking that how can we push the envelope in just making all the characters feel real, and having them say things uh, at times rather than, like, for example, a lot of the dialogue that comes from the mercs, which is, conveying their personality, is also informing you of something that's going on in the game that you need to know. And other times it's different. You already know it's happened, and then they're commenting on it. So the latter is what I like, because that is a better opportunity to kind of bring out someone's kind of personality. And so I've concentrated a lot on, like, how can we just make all these characters' personalities feel like they have more depth and come through more. So one of the things I know I wanted to do was just have them have conversations with each other out of the blue, and there wasn't time to do that. Eventually, you have to stop working on a game and get it out there, because otherwise, being an artistic type, it's never perfect, and you just want to keep adding and adding and adding. So eventually, you have to say no, it's got to stop. So, but that was one of the things, and that's another thing that's in Jagged Alliance 3. So, very happy about that.
Yeah, I think being able to bring the world to life through those, because we have, I don't know if anyone watched the dev stream we did on the narrative and the dialogue structure, and we had Rado on here, and we were talking about the different tools that the writing team has to bring the world to life and to have those character moments come forward. And I think those ambient dialogues that happen, which also adds some replayability because it was depending on which mercs you have in your squad. It's entertaining. It adds context to who they are. It also kind of grows as they grow throughout the narrative and what decisions you make. It makes it feel more alive and more immersive. And I can imagine, having to make the hard decision of not having the opportunity to do that in the past is tough. When you know the depth of the characters you want, right? The characters obviously had a lot of backstory. Um, this is something that we talked about during the. This wasn't a question on the chat, but it's something that came up during our pre-stream prep that I didn't know. I don't remember knowing. Is you had said that a lot of the Jag characters actually were heavily inspired from real life.
Oh, yeah. So much of the dev team that worked on Jagged Alliance 2 is in Jagged Alliance 2, in terms of their faith being the inspiration for the 2D art that was used to create a character, or represent a character rather. So I'm in there. I'm an NPC, as a scientist somewhere. Um, my wife Linda was the inspiration for Meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, John Ling, who uh, Jagged Alliance 2 fans will remember, was the main writer, and co-designer of the game. He's Wolf. He even voices Wolf. So he's truly Wolf. But even like MD, for example, character that's in Jagged Alliance 3, that was also in Jagged Alliance 2, was a person on the dev team. In that case, it was, I think, the lead programmer. But pretty much all of them are there in some way. So it was fun. It was kind of like an inside joke. And, like, if you didn't want to have your sort of portrait in the game, so be it. But if you did, hey, it was just fun.
I wonder if that's part of that the personality that we were just discussing coming out, and that you're pulling from those inside jokes and those moments and those real life reference points, and you're like, oh man, could you imagine if you were in this situation, like what would you do? And you can write that into the game dynamics. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun being able to do kind of things where no one is there to stop you. Like basically deciding on some very rare incident that may happen if all these stars were aligned, and it would create a memorable moment, but like only maybe 6% of game players would ever experience it, and that's kind of hard to do today because you got a producer, you got all these people kind of watching budget, and you basically being asked the programmer to kind of like, can you program in this so that in these conditions this thing happens and this like happens, and then like look at you like you're just crazy, So we're able to do a lot of those things back in the day, and I think that because of that, because it's created those memorable moments, it's allowed for that to continue to a certain extent in Jagged Alliance 3. So, but if it wasn't for us doing in Jagged Alliance 2, that may not be here in Jagged Alliance 3. So, it's fun to see how these things happen and set a standard.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's something that I wrestle with a lot as a developer myself. Is that it's games have become. I mean, I know it's easy. We say this, but it's not a cop out. Games are so much more complicated now to put together, and the team sizes are so much larger, and the budgets are so much more complex. So that decision making process is inherently a little more balanced because it's not a team of like 8 or 10 people anymore. Now it's a team of 30 or 50 or 150, and it's really, it's from a production standpoint, being a producer, it's you want to create that environment in that space where those creative decisions come out and the freedom is there. But as you were talking about before, the budget's not infinite, and we still have to get a product done and put together that makes sense. And if you let those meanderings go too far with so many people, right? It's not just 3 people having a creative idea; it's 50, and 50 creative ideas is a lot of time. It's tough to balance. I feel like we've done an okay job with that on Jagged Alliance 3, but it's a balancing act that I don't think you're always struggling to improve. You never get it perfect. It's always something you can get better. And I do wonder and imagine that the dynamics of making a game with 6 people in the room or 10 people in the room is completely different. I worked in a small studio once of 10 to 12 people back in the day, and you can just yell at each other and talk to each other in real time, as opposed to you have to have a meeting to bring the 4 departments together to make a decision on anything, which is much more complicated.
Right.
Um, I do want to go into we're chugging along, we're doing good, but I want to get into the Jagged Alliance 3 questions. We have a few, but I want to grab one more because it's related to Jagged Alliance 3, and I think it's one that we've talked about a lot, and we're going to keep on talking about it because I know it's an important one to discuss. Clay PL asked, "What was the decision making I love this question, by the way. I mean, it comes up all the time. What was the decision making process with the lack of percentage to hit chance? In the past, it was somewhat common, but certainly nowadays it is very rare. Was that the tension/chaos building mechanism, or were there other factors that led to that decision? Um, and I know this is more about your part of making that decision back in the day, because we have made that choice. Um, it wasn't like put on you, I should say. But I will say that when you and I were first talking about, I think your very first play experience with Jagged Alliance 3, and I'll never forget this. You articulated, because we did have a chance to hit back then. When we first started the development, the game did have a chance to hit, and you didn't think it was a bad choice. You thought it played in a way that was still good gameplay, and there was some cool decision making. So I remember you weren't negative on it, but your comment was that it felt very puzzle like, and your decisions were a little more mental and very mathematical. And you felt it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you kind of articulating that it didn't feel quite like Jagged Alliance in your opinion. And we had a couple calls about this in a really quick time frame, because I think all of us, you and me and the team, were all like, okay, we all know that something doesn't feel right in the combat, but we're not sure what. And I think you actually were, I think, the one that helped us kind of navigate if we should make the decision or not. So, what was that a conscious decision in the past, or was that just the way things were back then?
Well, I kept a lot of things under the hood, and so that there were a lot of discussions at the time. One of my co-designers on the team, who was also a programmer, he was very pro for like let's give the player all the information, how everything works, and because the RPG elements that we were trying to put in most RPG games, you would basically be shown all the information. Yet for me, it was also a simulation. So I've always kind of viewed the game as you getting to know the characters and getting a feel for things, and not just looking at numbers. Yes, we needed to give you numbers for action point management, etc. Um, but everything else, even how your characters would improve over time in terms of their stats, or if they were hurt and bleeding, all those rates, instead of just throwing all kinds of numbers at you. And again, it's very subjective stuff. I don't like to personally see too many numbers on screen. If I'm playing a first-person shooter, for example, I'm not seeing chance to hit. It's up to my skill, and I try to imagine it as the skill of the characters and and them making the choices that they're going to make. If I see a percentage, I'm just going to go for the highest percentage, and I'm not going to really. That's less of a decision for me to make, and less of a feel thing. So it's just very subjective. But my preference was definitely to not have the chance to hit percentage in there. But at the same time, because of XCOM and other modern games, there's an expectation. Gaming trends change over time. All that has to be considered. So just because I have a personal preference and I see the game playing really good this way, it's also been a long time, and so a lot of things have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, it was. I feel like um, it's one of the riskier choices we made, and I remember even when we were making that decision to remove chance to hit, because we had it in there for a little while. There were a number of people that in different parts of that were involved in Jagged Alliance who they're like, well, what? And I see this happening right now in chat, which is a very default thought, which is, why don't you just do both? Why don't you have chance to hit and have it as a toggle, and you can just turn it off, and we can be turned off by default. And I think it can't be overstated how much removing chance to hit plays into the core mechanics of the entire game. It's not something that it's not just a UI element. It because of that decision making process changing, it adjusts how the player makes their choices in most situations. Because like you said, once you see it, you make different decisions. You move your characters completely differently. And we noticed this in how we were watching recordings of even like focus testers. They were playing completely different when chance to hit was on versus off, which meant that the AI, the aim accuracy, like everything was completely wildly different based on that one decision. And I remember looking at this and thinking about the scope. Now here's my producer brain coming in, right? And this is where someone had to tell someone what to do, I guess, to a certain degree on budget. It's like if we were to make both versions, if we were to have a toggle, we're basically making two completely differently balanced games, two completely different AI systems, different ways that AI navigates the world. And it was just going to be way too much. And we couldn't make both titles. We had to choose one way or the other. I am someone that plays a lot of the chance to hit base XCOM games, Wasteland, whatever. I really like the uniqueness that Jagged Alliance 3's mechanics brings to the genre. It's not often that you get fresh takes, and even though it's not fresh, it's a resurgence, if you will. I think that makes Jagged Alliance 3 have its own personality and its own space in the genre, and I like it. I know for a fact that some modders are going to add it in, and I'm happy that they're going to. I think it's going to be exciting for people that want to touch it. But I think we shouldn't be scared as artists and as developers to take some chances and really immerse ourselves in that to create different experiences, right? We can't all just regurgitate the same things over and over again, or there's nothing new and there's nothing innovative. So I'm hoping the players like it. I hope that they like the braveness of that choice.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that it was the right decision to make, but that's just my bias speaking.
Right. I mean, that's the tough part about game development. You don't know until it goes out there. So we'll see. So let's grab some of the Jagged Alliance 3 questions that I have here because I think some of them are quite fun. Let's see. Mm-mm-mm. We kind of asked that one already. Let's go with okay, this is a good one. So I think, and I don't know how much you have an answer for this, but I like it. So, oh fine, this is Cordnor again. Cordnor asks, there had been character progression from Jagged Alliance 1 to Jagged Alliance 2, from small things like Snake growing a beard, to things like Hamus becoming a merc, going to sell ice cream, Larry going to rehab, and of course the Buzz and Lynx drama. So, obviously we don't want to do any spoilers, but is there anything you can tell us about approaches you were taking to developing the characters forward in Jagged Alliance 3?
Um, that's a good question. I'm sure there was some of that, but to be honest, I'm blanking. So I don't want to make this boring by me kind of spending 2 minutes thinking about it. So, uh, yeah, I don't remember, to be honest.
Mm.
Sorry.
No, no, it's okay. Yeah, I think the there's a lot of opportunity to play with some of the legacy from some of the older characters and the relationships. And I think that we tried to hold on to some of the at least the character dynamics between the different characters. So I'll be curious to see what players like. I think what sometimes happens is you write the characters in a believable way, and people interpret that as evolution or progress of their character backstories. So I'll be very interested to see what people pull out from the new writing for how these different characters were written.
I mean, there's definitely some, I would say, character arc between Jagged Alliance 2 and Jagged Alliance 3, but
Mm.
but those are ones I cannot mention because they'd be a spoiler. So that's kind of why I'm kind of all the things that come to mind are the things that I didn't say. So
Yeah, there's one that comes to my mind directly, and I can't mention it because some of them are tied into the core plot of Jag 3, and you have to discover that for yourself. So yeah, that's a fair blocker because you don't want to ruin anything. Um, this is an easier one. So Shadow Magic asks, "What's your most favorite merc in Jag Alliance 3?" Or even better, if you can answer either one, which merc do you identify most with?
um, I like red a lot. Maybe it's my Scottish heritage, um, but I have so many favorites. And I mean, you can look at them from two different perspectives. What are my favorite ones to use because they're solid and they're great in combat, and which ones are just the ones that are just quirky and fun. But I always like Livewire. I mean, sorry, I like Livewire. I like Meltdown. I like Vicky, Red, and I'm an Ivan fan. From just Ivan has always been pretty special. So you know,
I had to be biased. I still think my current favorite is Fidel, mostly because his humor and like the stuff he says in dialogue is just absolutely ridiculous, and I enjoy playing Fidel and just seeing him react. I know we've leaked some of this in some of the trailer footage, or I think it's in some of the trailers we've already released. But there's a whole conversation sequence between him and this character in Early Island called Bombastic. That's like this like
yeah.
explosives maniac, and I remember when that first went in. This is years ago in a milestone, and I was sitting there playing, just doing my milestone feedback review, and just dying laughing. Like it was just so good. And I remember sitting there writing the milestone. I'm like, all right, we finally gotten some of that humor in because I just can't help but like actually laughing out loud. This is great. So I think because of that, Fidel is just someone that I always add in because of the you just don't know what that dude's gonna say. Like so he just says stuff and you're like, really, man? Like really? So he's a number one for me for sure.
No, Fidel's great. Reminds me
Uh,
of the when he used to
But
just go off and do things on his own in the early games. So you just lose control of him, which was kind of funny in a turn-based game, and people didn't expect that, so it was fun.
Zeo1KS asks, are there any features you couldn't add in Jagged Alliance 2 because of technological other limitations, but were able to implement from Jagged Alliance 3 this time around? I think you were talking about some of the quest system and the storytelling devices, but is there anything else that jumps out to you where you're like, man, I wish we could have done that back then, and now we can, and that's really cool?
Um, um, boy, I think it really comes down to what I would call the personality stuff again. Like even the fact that we have not even a more robust conversation system, but we were able to allow Merc to jump into the conversations and just comment on things. So it's just again so much more character and life that it brings to the game. There was definitely some restrictions back in Jagged Alliance 2 days, even really with recording budget and how many characters we were going to do. We wanted to, I think we had so many NPCs and we wanted to voice them all. So we were a little bit worried about what the budget was going to be. So we had to kind of be reasonable for how much actual Merc dialogue we had. So I just feel that THQ has just gone all out with this game, and basically we've been able to do so much more just even from that perspective of a budget.
Yeah, it was I remember when we were doing the original budgeting and bids for all the VO, and it's a lot of lines, like a lot of characters that have a lot of stuff to say. And we talked about this again with Rado and Bouillon about it's not just the one-time through lines, because those lines also change based on who you have and what situations are going. And like you said, there's those interjections that we added into the dialogue system, which adds a little more um uh uh I mean, it's not just flavor; it's immersiveness, because you wouldn't expect that a character that had a strong opinion to sit there and have this conversation happen and not jump in. So you get that little bit of realism in there. But all of that is, a non-trivial amount of writing and then recording and then editing. And then, I mean, and this is even the other part, implementation. When you're implementing 250, 300,000 VO lines or words of VO into the game, it's not lines, but words. It's just nuts. And it's a novel worth of VO that has to be implemented and balanced and everything. So, I, I I think and it's actually, I know this is a decision that we're going to get some controversy about, and it's maybe there was different ways, but it's also one of the reasons why we went with the portrait approach that we did. Because originally we wanted to do portraits that moved and had different dynamics to them. Then we played with different like expressions and emotions. Then we look at this at scale and go, holy goodness, we have 40 mercs and all of these characters, and they have all these situations. And how are we going to really do this at scale with all the other things that we're trying to do and get all of the elements of their visual style out? And we were looking at portraits that the community had created for some of the previous Jagged Alliance games. We did a big portrait study on different approaches, and we took the approach that we did to make them a little more artistic and expressive of their personality, as opposed to making them animated like 3D characters, or even like having facial animations, which we did some experiments with and didn't work in the 2D portraits. It's sometimes when you play the game through and you have like 8 or 10 mercs, it's not always easy to realize just how much that magnifies that scale. Because the scale is what makes these open world games really blow everything up. It's not just 1 or 2 passes. You're making a game that you can play 100 different ways with all these different permutations. And um, I think we did a pretty decent job with what we had to work with. And I'm hoping that everyone enjoys that. And I think the VO is a good place where we could definitely lean into it and bring as much of that to life. And credit to you and the writing team, which was not a multiple person job. There was a lot of writing that went into it.
Yes, I don't remember what the final word count was, but really up there. Yeah, fun stuff.
Let's ask another question on the feature side, 'cause I think this is an interesting one. Maybe a similar answer to what we were talking about before, but Clay PL, who I think is in chat, asked, "What was your favorite feature or change implemented by in Jagged Alliance 3 by Hemimont, that was perhaps missing in past installments? I think we're kind of getting at the same question, but
Yeah,
was there anything
yeah.
else that kind of jumped out at you feature wise, like maybe combat wise, or with the way that you kind of navigated the open world elements with satellite view?
Um, Nothing's coming to mind because I mean, I think the team had a big enough task at hand to just get everything in there from Jagged Alliance 2, let alone go further because we really went to town on the strategic layer on Jagged Alliance 2. Um, uh, but but accomplishing all that and what I think is really done excellently now in this version is I think the world is so much more alive. For example, when you're just in a given sector and there's all these NPCs, they're they're walking around talking. You could eavesdrop. You can, or even when you're in battle, just all the comments instead of just grunts and stuff like when you're in combat from your enemies and stuff. I mean, they're hurling insults at you. They're making various comments. I mean, it just is fantastic. It's just so immersive. Um, so I think the bar has been raised in a significant way in that respect. That's going beyond all the conversation stuff and the interjections or the dialogue between themselves. Just even in combat, it's just yeah, it's just so much more alive. I think.
Claypeel also asked, and I think this is a good like open-ended one. How was it? How was it to be back again working on a new game, on a new Jagged Alliance game? Like, what was that experience for you like?
Oh my God, it's fantastic. Literally the best time of my life. Before now is working on Jagged Alliance 2, and that is I remember so much. And when I say remember, like I don't necessarily mean like doing the work so much, but just the camaraderie, the team, the really being excited. And we worked long hours, 7 days a week for months. Like we crunched to try to get everything we wanted to get done in it. And the um, but so you have this fantastic memory of this greatest time of your life, and then someone gives you the opportunity to go back and um, play a role in that again. It's a completely different role. I'm not in charge. I'm being asked to work on a very specific part of it. But it's it's I don't know. It's just one of the greatest privileges to be able to work on this again. The fact that this game is coming out, that it exists, it's just so exciting to me. And being a part of it in any way um, is just wonderful.
What was it like working with the Hemont team? I know, there's so many of them that are very obviously hardcore Jagged Alliance fans. So it's people that are, fans and trying to, pay respect to something they love and care about. What was the experience working with, Bouillon and Rado and all the different people you interacted with?
A lot of fun because they're very funny people, and um, there's there's always jokes being made. So in all our meetings and conversations, it's always fun. And they're very professional at the same time. They're very, I would say, even keeled and get upset. I don't remember any big huge screaming matches or arguments. We might have had little disagreements, but they're artistic stuff. Everything's very subjective. Just because one person wants to do it this way doesn't mean everyone else is going to want to do it that way. So but on the whole, it was easy. It was just easy. It was just so smooth. We'd have our weekly meetings and it'd be like, yeah, there's no real issues to kind of iron out. No one's ready to punch the other guy or anything like that. Or we're mostly on the same page on everything. So it was smooth and enjoyable. And yeah, I'm very grateful.
It's something that I noticed about the Hemont team when I first met them is that they're very passionate. They have a lot of as any good artist and developer does, they have a lot of opinions on different things, but they're very collaborative. And there's this sense of kind of getting all sometimes to a little bit of slowness, but get all the ideas in the room and talk through them and really kind of make that decision together. And I really enjoyed that process and that perspective that they bring in. Even when it comes to like reviewing some of the writing, they would pass those note opportunities around to everybody in the team, and you get these documents back of all of their different feedback. And it wasn't like you have to do this, but it gave you um, some interesting opinions to navigate through that were always in the best interest of trying to make the best game. And I really enjoyed that collaborative option. Clay PL, he's the one that asked a question. What I don't know if that's a viable question. I'll ask it. Clay PL wanted us asks, hold on, what was it? How many people got punched in production of Jagged Alliance 2? Oh, I think it's a joke. Um, Probably none, I would hope.
Um, yeah, he's referencing what I just kind of said, that no one wanted to punch each other. So what happened on JA2 makes that so different. I'm sure there were people who wanted to punch each other. We had some, we had a little bit of conflict and stuff, and some passion arise. And I remember my wife screaming a certain programmer's name every so often because he was working on the level, creating all the various levels and the tactical combat, etc. And he was using a tool that was an in-house tool created by the developer, and sometimes there would be problems with this tool. And I said, if you know the character Meltdown, my wife can swear like the best of them. So yeah, there was some liveliness happening here, but I don't think it ever got physical.
So some of the meltdown lines may have been real world references. Let's just put it that way. Oh, that's funny. I wonder if she'll watch any of this and what she thinks of it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I probably shouldn't give it a link to this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. All right, let's grab two more questions from the sheet. One's for me and one's for you, and I'm gonna try to grab some questions from chat here before we wrap up here. Um, so Castle asked, also a question for Brad. What has the development process been like for you? Can you describe various parts or stages of development or any interesting things that you decided to do during development? And I can raise the same question to any other members of the dev team present. It's I've worked on a couple franchise products now in my career, and I think it's the part that's the most stressful is you want to pay respect and you really want to embody the spirit of the franchise, but you have to do some things new and you have to make some decisions. And that's something that you really look at every step of development, from even pre-prototyping, experiment with different things, to as you're starting to refine visuals or trying to refine dialogue or working on the depths of the gun customization systems. You're looking at, as an example, we know how many people are favorites of certain some not to be named mods on Jagged Alliance 2 and how deep they take inventory systems and weapon systems and everything. And we're looking at that and we know how many fans are there and we know what they love about that. We also go, yes, but we're making a new game that's going to be for a new audience too, and we don't want to turn all of them off by bombarding them with infinite information all at the very beginning. And so there's this constant balancing act when it comes to heritage versus innovation, I guess is the best way to put it. And that comes at every stage of development. It's a stressful challenge because, as you probably heard from my language, as we've been working these dev streams, we don't know what people are going to think. We know what we've tested, we know our focus test responses, and we know where we think the game is at. But it's like anything in game development, you have no idea what's going to happen until it finally releases. So that's probably the most interesting and challenging aspect of development from my perspective, is helping the team navigate that the best way I can from the producer's seat. I was really grateful, working with thqnordic and being on that, being able to, as Ian said, really give the team as much time and opportunities they needed to make the best game they could. We didn't really put a lot of time or schedule pressure on them. We more put pressure on how far we went on certain things, so that we didn't, like Ian said, blow things up infinitely, because that can happen. We tried to focus on very specific areas to refine, and I think that opportunity of like getting the focus test feedback, getting Ian involved and getting all his feedback from different things, and really trying to refine it was also a part of the process that I'm glad we were able to do, because I've been on projects where that's not always the case. You do have a schedule and a budget and a time frame, and it's like, nope, we got like 10 months, so you got to close it up and go. I think that As far as, I don't know if you have a perspective on that from your seat, but we really did try to give enough room for the team to fill into what they were trying to make, not expand it, but where they set the parameters around the game, let the content, the depth, the functionality be refined and well weighted to that scope. And we didn't rush that process. We gave them time to do that. And I'm grateful that thqnordic is approaching game development that way, because I think that's the only, my personal opinion is, that's the only shot you have at making a great game. You don't always make great games. Sometimes you just get good games, but your only chance at making a great game is by doing that, not by clamping it and going. That's another aspect that I'm really grateful for. I don't know if you want to jump in on any comments on that.
I will just basically echo what you said, in the sense that when I was asked to participate in this, I was very kind of, I don't know, I had my doubts at first, but I was assured that it was going to be done right and done properly, and that the resources would be there, etc. And then that proved out time and time again, as became apparent that the game needed more incubation time, and we would get that time, etc. That they were, I'm kind of amazed that they did exactly what they said they were going to do in terms of how they were going to support it and prioritize it, etc. So I can agree with you that some of the best games, without mentioning some other publishers and developers out there, that they don't release until it's ready, and it pays off for them, because that's what really makes a good game. As soon as you clamp it down and put a timeline on it, you're hampering the product in some way, and it could affect whether it's successful or not.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys tell your friends and like it and enjoy it, because that's what we're hoping. We're hoping that you'll that hard work and effort will reflect. I always get nervous. We're getting close to release, and I've shipped like 17 or 18 games out of my career, and it's you never get used to you never get used to that little pit in your stomach of like, oh man, like in a couple weeks this thing's gonna roll out and we're gonna see what happens. So the next couple weeks of streaming with you guys, and we're gonna do a little more interactive streams here soon to play the game live more. It's gonna lead up to a moment where you're all gonna get a chance to play it, and here's hoping you love it. I do want to take one off-topic questions from the thing here before I go to the chat questions, because I know I already saw someone asking about this in the chat, so it's kind of combined. And Castle, by the way, Castle, if you're in chat, you had some great questions, so I really appreciate you putting the time in. So, oh no, I'm sorry, Castle. This is Elder 3. Castle had other questions earlier. This is Elder 3's question. So, in the most recent dev stream, Brad mentioned that Ian Currie was a musician as well as a game developer. I personally do not have any musical talent at all, but for a variety of reasons, listening to music is an integral part of my day-to-day life. Could Mr. Currie take a moment to speak of his musical interest? Is there a specific genre or style of music that is near and dear to him, or perhaps a favorite instrument to play? I saw someone earlier in chat asking if you played any instrument on the soundtrack. So yeah, they were just interested about your. And I know you have the virtual green screen on. I know a couple of our calls, you have like your studio and your guitars and everything around, and your keyboards and whatnot. So
Well, yeah, I'll try to make it brief, because you'll get me rambling forever when it comes to music. It's also a big part of my life. I love music. I From both listening and playing, I play guitar and bass and some keyboards, and try to compose. I'm also an audiophile. I like audio engineering, so I like recording and composing songs and doing all that stuff just for myself. I grew up listening to a lot of progressive rock and classic rock, but I'm also into jazz. And now that I'm an older and more refined individual, I love classical music. I've learned that a lot of progressive rock is basically just rock version of classical music. I love so many genres. I also love pop and stuff, and from almost every decade, I can find bands that I really love. And I'm a big Pink Floyd fan. A lot of my monikers always Mad Floyd. I'm a David Gilmour nut. I love his playing. Also Jeff Beck. But I like a lot of jazz, 50s jazz. I'm all over the place. I just love music, and music. I listen to music every day. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know you and I have had just a few conversations about music. My background, my early days of education was in music as well, and I'll say, and this is a little bit of a bring it back to Jag. What is your opinions about George's soundtrack so far in Jagged Alliance 3? I mean, how do you feel about the music and how it came together?
Great, it's great. I'm
Right?
so thrilled that it was recorded with a real live orchestra. Didn't have that luxury back in Jagged Alliance too. So yeah, oh my God, the music is great. Um,
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to you guys about that. It's something that's near and dear to my heart because I really love George's composing in general, and the soundtrack I think is phenomenal. One of the elements that I can't wait to talk to you guys about is some of the authentic African elements we brought in with the African choir we got to bring and use, and they are just incredibly like just so talented. There's a lot of and then plus the full orchestra and some of the more cinematic film score types. So there's such a range. Oh yeah, you're right, Clay PL. We gotta have a little bit of music posted to YouTube before the release. I'll work on that. Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, it's I'm super excited. I mean, I can't obviously the Jagged Alliance 2 soundtrack and people really love, but I don't know many soundtracks that I've been this excited about, both as a fan and as a developer. So can't wait for you guys to see that. I know we're running a bit long, but let me see if I can grab a couple questions from chat real quick. Let me scroll through these and see if there's anyone that we can grab that are relatively quick. We answered this one. I don't know if you can answer this. This is a quick one. Pseudo Skymonus asks, did Link and Buzz finally get along in Jagged Alliance 3? I'm not sure if that's an easy question to answer or not.
I'm good. Can I pass on that one?
Ah! Oh man.
Sorry.
Let's see here. We answered that one about the difference between Jag. Oh, that's actually an interesting question. Even though it's a little bit more subtle, I don't think we've answered this one really. This particular one. What is the biggest difference developing a game like Jagged Alliance in the '90s versus today?
The size of the team for one thing. One of the I don't won't say so much the now versus then in terms of what's available technologically, but the tools for Jagged Alliance 3 were amazing. So it's a shame that players don't get to see those things, but I guess they will with some of the modding tools and stuff. But
Yeah.
they're really well done, and it just makes um, working on the game so much better because a lot of times the tools are what kind of suffer because if the developer can get the job done with it, even though it's kind of quirky and maybe buggy and stuff like this, it often happens. But the tools that Himam offers is top notch. So I think that's one of the bigger differences. But the size of the teams and the coordination of everyone's efforts obviously plays a big difference from working on a small team of like 12 people.
Yeah, and I think it's a big credit to him because that engine and almost all the tools that they have are all their own built. So there's a lot of Ivanasen and the programming team there is incredibly talented. And I know we talked a lot about the dialogue and the narrative tools and how hard it is to build a system that has so many branching narratives and implementations involved. And it's pretty impressive what they built.
Yeah.
Let's see. I actually don't know the question answer to this one. I don't know if we can answer it. Well, no, I'll skip that one. A lot of people are asking questions about different characters, right? Like one, uh, KLIMT Gold asked, I loved Ira. Any chance she's back in the third game? Marcellus Wallace asks, is Mike in the new games? There's a lot of questions about his character's back or not. I'm not sure how many of those we can give up or how many we can, or if you can just give a clear answer that they're not.
Well, I
But
can tell you, Ira's not in Jagged Alliance 3, and it's just interesting that someone really liked her because that was one of the characters we got the most complaints about at the time because
oh, really?
everyone, she had that very thick, American East Coast accent, and a lot of people. I thought like the voice actor did a great job with it, and I loved the character, but we'd get a lot of negative feedback. I hate her. I can't stand her voice, and all that sort of stuff. But I loved her. So I'm thrilled that someone just remembers her. And, it was fun.
It's funny. As soon as you said that, chat started going off, and then like two people said, okay, Ira was flat, Ira was very annoying, and then she was annoying but somewhat charming, and then what? Ira's one of the most wanted characters. So it's like even in this chat, there's the range of responses. Yeah, Hawk42, Ira is terrible. TOB1, Ira is the best. Oh geez, that's great. In real time, my friend. Things don't change.
Love controversy.
Hawk402 said again, there's nothing I like about Ira, but I think it's kind of funny. Oh, it's so good. Let's see. Mr. Montag 451 asked about multiplayer. We do have co-op. We're gonna do a stream on co-op to talk about the details. But there is co-op available, and you can have people take different mercs, and there's a lot you can do there. So let's see.
Which is amazing. Just amazing. You talk about something that I wouldn't have been able to do back in the day that we now have in this game. I mean, that's going to be so much fun.
And co-op is not an easy feature to add. Any multiplayer, I don't know if how obvious this is to people, but once you add multiplayer, and the level of development and the work goes up by about 80% or 70% immediately. A lot more bugs, a lot more complexities in physics systems and syncing, and even weapon systems. We have all those physics simulations for the bullets. Everything just gets harder. I mean, it's all harder.
Not even the design side, right? Like when one player is going to speak to a character in an NPC, for example, how that's portrayed to everyone else, so that they understand what's going on. I mean, it's a lot to take into consideration.
Well, even because we have those systems that allow you to, say, for example, overhear a conversation. What if one player has taken their character and walked on the other side of the map, and the other one sneaks up and hears a conversation, but the other person misses it, and that's critical information? Whose notebooks get updated? It's a whole thing. It's fun, and I obviously it's valuable to add, but every time it's just like, oh man, here we go again. Like all the bugs, all the weird things that are gonna sneak up on you that you don't even think about that are gonna be hard.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the very beginning of the development, when that was a goal, I mean, they're crazy.
They're maniacs. What are they doing? Oh man. Well, Ian, I think we're about 15 minutes over schedule. I'm looking to see if anyone has any final questions, but I think we're going to probably wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was a blast. Appreciate it.
I know this is not really as much of an announcement, but I'll tell you this. So we are going to do a really fun celebratory launch day stream the day of the game's launch. We're going to be probably streaming for a while, 5 or 6 hours. We're going to have different guests on, and Ian has been gracious enough to join for part of that dev day release stream. The Hemont team will be joining. We'll have multiple cameras walking around their office, and we're going to be celebrating there with them. We'll have Ian on. We'll have a couple other guests on. One of the other producers, Roger's, going to be joining. We may try to get George from the composition team to join. So it's just going to be an opportunity for us to celebrate the launch of the game. So we'll announce final times a little bit later. We're still trying to work out exactly when we're going to start the streams. We want to start it an hour or so before the game goes live, but then the game may go live early U.S. time because of EU time. And so there's still some things we're working out. So stay tuned for that. But we are definitely going to have a really fun celebration for the launch day stream. No, Claypiel, Pavel was around earlier, but we wanted to focus on Ian today. Jamaica says, Ian, say hello to Meltdown for us. We love her. So it looks like a lot of Meltdown fans in chat. Anything unless you want finally you want to say to the team the chat before we go?
I can't wait to hear what you guys think of the game. I'm very happy with it. So get in there, have fun.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that's going to wrap us up for today. We'll be back here next Thursday with another dev stream. The Dev Diary will go live next week We're on a every week schedule, so feel free to tune in with us again next week. And thank you very much for joining us. We hope you have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're at, and stay safe until next Thursday. Take care, everyone. Take care. Bye.